Greetings! This video is about the warfare in World War I. After watching this video, you should be able to discuss why World War I was a total war. But before we begin, we should know what a total war is. In a total war, any weapons can be used. There aren't restrictions on territory or people involved. Civilians might die and might even be targeted. Additionally, in a total war, all of a country's resources are dedicated to the war effort. So really, in this video, we are going to look at how countries dedicated their resources to the war. We'll discuss all of these individually, and then we'll put up the list at the end. One of the first things that made World War I a total war was non-combatants, meaning people that weren't fighting. These people were kind of indirectly attacked. One of the ways that this happened was through the use of blockades. A blockade is when a navy prevents goods or people from entering or leaving an area. If needed goods, like food, can't get into a country, that is going to impact everybody because everybody in the country needs to eat, which is what happened when the British blockaded Germany in the First World War. Hundreds of thousands of Germans, many of whom weren't wearing army uniforms. They weren't in the trenches. They're just civilians. They died of starvation. A total war also meant that a country's resources needed to be dedicated to the war effort. Needed supplies needed to be set aside to make sure that soldiers had everything that they needed. In order for the soldiers to have everything that they needed, governments engaged in rationing, which is when a person was to have only a fixed amount of something that could be better dedicated to helping soldiers win the war. So in Great Britain, sugar, flour, margarine, meat, milk, butter, they were all rationed so that soldiers could have them. Third, countries spent a lot of money on war, sometimes more than they had. And wars are expensive. There are tons of things countries had to spend money on. Countries need to pay soldiers. They need to buy shells and guns and warships and uniforms, medical supplies, airplanes, the list goes on and on. It is estimated that the Allies spent about $147 billion on the First World War. The Central Powers spent about $61 billion. One way to raise that money was through taxes, which meant, of course, that citizens were not only paying a psychological and often physical price for being at war, they were also obviously paying an economic price as well. As a side note, many of these countries had to borrow some of that money. A lot of them borrowed it from the United States. 4, World War I needed a lot of soldiers. The war was just too big and probably too violent to rely solely on volunteers. Therefore, governments issued drafts in order to make sure that there were enough soldiers. A draft, or conscription, is when people legally have to join the military. For example, the United States passed the Selective Service Act of 1917, which is when all males aged 18 to 30 had to register to potentially be selected for military service. At the end of World War I, more than half of the nearly 5 million Americans who served in the armed forces were drafted. The last thing we are going to talk about is propaganda. Remember that a total war is when countries devote all of their resources to a war efforts. And perhaps one of the most valuable resources that a country has are its people and the minds of the people. And so part of a total war is focusing the minds of the people on winning the war. States do that through propaganda. Propaganda is when people are presented with information that is biased, often inaccurate, and it's meant to persuade people. Countries during World War I issued propaganda to get their citizens to do everything from save food to join the army and even see the enemy as evil. So as you can see, countries were completely dedicated to winning World War I. So I'm going to put up this list on how World War I became a total war through blockades, through rationing, through taxes, through conscription, through propaganda. It's probably not a complete list, but at least gives us an idea of what countries were doing. So now you can hopefully see how these countries were so dedicated to winning the war. It was an ugly war, and it took everything countries had really just to compete. Thanks for watching.